Yeah, I think everyone's in. Welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining us. We've got an exciting sort of hour lined up. We actually haven't done one of these for quite a while. We sort of did quite a few in the beginning with COVID and keeping active and doing some really cool tastings. And then we've had a bit more flexibility. We've been allowed to go out, and now we're in third waves, and France is opening up, so it's all up and down everywhere. And yeah, this is just a really important time of year for us as we begin to get to grips with our new Burgundy campaign. For those of you that are familiar with, well, most of you will be because you're part of the Burgundy campaign. It is our most important time of the year. It's the heartbeat of Great Domains. It's where it all started back in 1999. It's the sort of, as I say, the big passion part of Great Domains is working with all these amazing producers. Yeah, we're currently in the middle of doing the sort of the arduous task of doing the 2018 allocations. And I think the ship, Wayne mentioned to me yesterday, the ship is finally docked. And now we are just waiting for the first lot to arrive in Johannesburg. So for those of you that don't know, shipping has been an absolute nightmare in the last 6 to 8 months. So everything's just slightly delayed, but we're fortunate that it's finally arriving. And yeah, we can start to get to grips with the 18s. We normally are in Burgundy in December. I think this is certainly the first time that since I've been in Great Domains, that we haven't been in Burgundy in December. So we've lacked, or obviously missed, seeing all of our producers and catching up and tasting the new vintages. So we are in a position where we have to use this sort of technology for the moment. But I think what's really important tonight is just to give everyone a bit of an overview and a bit of insight into specifically the 2018 vintage, because that's what we obviously going to be receiving. And we are very grateful and privileged to have two producers and friends of ours join us tonight. Pierre-Yves, who's on the call from Pierre-Yves Colin-Morey, and Antoine Gouges from Domaine Henri Gouges in Nuit-Saint-Georges. So we wanted to give some perspective on the white wines from the Côte d'Or, and then also on the red side with Antoine. And obviously everyone's pretty familiar with the way Zoom works. If you do have some questions, please type it on the group. I'll try and just manage some questions and take everyone through it. So yeah, we'll start probably and kick off with Pierre-Yves. We've obviously been catching up before everyone joined. Pierre-Yves, great to see you, and sorry we missed you in December. I see you in a short sleeve t-shirt and we're all in jackets, so summer has obviously arrived in Burgundy.
Yeah, the sun finally came a few days ago with very warm temperature. We really needed it, but mostly the vineyards that are they are more than happy to have this sun. So we are, yeah, it feels like summer started a few days ago.
No, it's good to see, especially after all the drama that you've all unfortunately experienced this year in April, which is probably not something you want to speak too much about, because I know it's pretty emotional in terms of what happened in the vineyards and what the frost did this year. So we're going to maybe not touch too much on that. We know, as I say, it was tough for everyone. But maybe before we get into the 2018 vintage, most of the clients and friends that are on the call are familiar with your wines and the domain. But maybe before we chat about the 18s, if you can just maybe give us a couple of minutes about the short history of the domain and when you started, and then maybe we'll move into the 218s.
Yeah, so I'm the oldest son of Marc Colin, which has an estate in Saint-Aubin, and we are 3 brothers and 1 sister, and everybody is in the winemaking. like I told you, I'm the older one, so I did 10 years with my father and my family from 1995 to 2005, and then from 2006. I left the family estate and I did my own estate with part of the vineyards from the family, and I use here the cellars below the house where I am now, and where we are now with the family, and yeah, it was so my estate started in 2000 with 2006 vintage.
Okay, 06. And then you also started, you obviously got a few vineyards from the family, and then you started to build up some of your own parcels.
Yeah, I started in 2001 a little bit on my own with some purchased fruit, and at the same time I was at my family estate. Then I left after the harvest in 2005, and just with a few vineyards, and during 15 years we had we had different opportunities to buy some vineyard in Saint-Aubin, in Chassagne, and we took the risk to borrow money to buy some, and now we don't have any regrets about that, of course. And now it's like, you know, I work with my wife, Caroline, and we have our two estates, but we are all doing everything together, like one estate. And I would say the history is not finished, because we have two sons, Mathis, which is 21, and Clément, 19, and both are in school now, in viticulture oenologic school, and they want to follow us, which will be a great part of history. Future is more important than the past.
Yeah,
of course.
And they probably both enjoy rugby like you. We're going to get them to South Africa one day.
Yeah, well, we enjoy rugby when France win, which is not so often, but no. Yeah. No, they are more soccer and football and tennis, but I mean, yeah, rugby will come. Yeah,
I mentioned that because, as you know, the last time we saw each other, we were very close to finalizing your trip to come visit us here in South Africa, and obviously, with what's happened in the world, that's been sort of put on ice for the moment. So when we're allowed to sort of start rearranging it again, we look forward to obviously getting you here in person, which will be great. Yeah. So Pierre-Yves, before the 218 summary and maybe just going through some important things on the whites, I think your wines and the reputation for your wines, certainly around the world, but obviously in South Africa, during the period we've been lucky enough to work with them, the style of the wines is something that really appeals to us. It's very, very pure white Burgundy with lots of tension, lots of balanced acidity, wines that we think can sort of age a long time, and a style of white wine that we obviously love. And maybe not a full detailed session, but just maybe a bit of a summary of your broad winemaking process, certainly on the white wine side of things, would be quite useful for everyone, just to understand maybe a few of the things that you do differently or don't do differently in terms of how you achieve your style of wine.
We work in a very simple way. I mean, we are very focused on vineyard work, of course, but also the date of picking, like you can imagine, is very important for the balance we are trying to get every year. And then the ways we bring the Chardonnay fruit to the press, which is really we don't want to crush. We don't crush the fruit, and then we have long press which are minimum 3.5 hours for each press. When we can, it's more around 4 hours. This is to get a minimum leaves at the end, to get leaves, but only good leaves and the minimum amount of leaves. And after that, we don't need any débourbage or anything. So, and then we don't have any SO2 in the juice. We put the juice in barrels. The fermentation is going naturally with no temperature control, no. Of course, we don't have any yeast, all natural yeast. And then we just follow the wine in fermentation. And like you know, we do a quite long élevage in 350 liters. And then we try to we try to don't touch too much the wine when we rack. We all rack with oxygen, with a compressor, and we don't use any pump system. And we bottle by gravity after 18 to 22 months of élevage. So it's really simple.
And your batonnage philosophy, are you quite low on the batonnage, sort of stirring of the leaves and all that?
No, we are absolutely zero on batonnage. We don't do it at all. Since I started on my own, I never did any.
Yeah. But the wines come across like that because obviously that usually gives a lot of richness. I think the richness in your wines are, if they are there, it's from the vineyard. Depending on which vineyard it is, the wines are lean and tense, and yeah. So I think that's very useful just to give a. I remember, I don't know if you remember when we had one tasting in your cellar and we finished from barrel, and then just near your foot you had a wine that was in bottle, and I think you had tasted it with the client. It was like 3/4 full, and you had tasted it 3 weeks before with the client, and you said, "Oh, well, let's just try it. Let's see what it's like." And I remember that so clearly because you put it in the glass, and even your eyes, the wine was still at 95%. It was perfect, and it was, I think, 2 or 3 weeks after you had pulled the cork. So just a good sign of, I suppose, the structure and the stability of the wine. I remember that very clearly. It was a good
the way we work, the way we are doing the élevage, the no filtration, all these things. I think our wine are really built to age. We work with this goal always, and because to me this is the main reason why Burgundy terroir can be fantastic. It's because they can really give us some fruit to make Chardonnay to age. And that is a real chance we have here that we have to try to manage.
Yeah.
That incident that we got with Pierre-Yves in his first cellar with that open bottle for 3 weeks, that was our very first tasting in your old cellars under Chassagne, Pierre-Yves, and it was our introduction. We were moving from cellar to cellar that night. That was our introduction.
I remember very well. I remember very well that day.
And Pierre, just I think it makes sense to maybe go on to the 2018, just before we went live. You're obviously telling about 2021 and the nightmare of losing 70% of your crop, which is just unheard of for South African winemakers. 2018, if I recall, was from a yield point of view or potential yield point of view for the region was quite good on the white side. How did you manage that? What did you do?
It was like every year we do the same work in spring in terms of ébourgeonnage, all these things. So we like to have we are not crazy about a very low amount of fruit. And so we had the same level of fruit compared to what we have usually when we don't have any problem with frost or something like that. So the amount of fruit was normal for us, but the level of juice was quite important compared to the amount of fruit. So that was really general in 2018 for Chardonnay. We had a level of juice that was really surprising. That surprised us. All of us were really surprised when we did the first press during the harvest, because again the fruit were not important in terms of numbers, but the juice inside was important, and that was probably due to a very wet spring. We had a lot of rain in May and June, and I think the soil were really humid and with a lot of reserve of water, and we had really dry July and August, but the juice was there, and it was one of the most comfortable crop we had last 15 years in Chardonnay. Wow. Yeah.
And that rain that you got, do you think that was a big help for you in a vintage like 18, where there was maybe a bit more sun in general, or how did the sort of the management of this?
Yes, there is some vintage vineyards are a little bit unlucky. There is some vintages vineyards are more lucky. 18 is one of these vintages that everybody was happy, vineyards, growers. That this amount of juice bring freshness to the white, because of the juice we had. The fruit didn't go to a very high level of alcohol. And probably with less juice inside the fruit would be completely different in terms of balance. But in 18, for Chardonnay especially, Pinot Noir was a little bit different, because, like in Chassagne we have both colors, and we could see that the Pinot went very high very quickly at the end of the maturation, but that didn't happen for us in Chardonnay, because probably because the juice and because very good acidity. So it was not. And there is one point where the Chardonnay didn't go more ripe, in 2018. Sometimes it goes really fast at the end, very high, but that was not the case in 18. Honestly, in 2018, we were quite early in terms of date of picking. But I'm not sure the date of picking in 2018 Chardonnay was so important, because there is a time when it didn't really change the maturity of the fruit. That is my opinion.
Yeah, it was quite interesting. I was reading, without mentioning the estate, but one of the top white wine estates in Côte, where they did some green harvesting up to sort of 40% in 2018, which is quite interesting, because it's very much opposite, where I assume by that level of green harvesting and stripping the grapes that it's going to potentially give a lot more alcohol concentration in 18. And it's quite interesting to see the sort of, I suppose, the difference in almost the philosophy of green harvest versus no green harvest.
Yeah, but the green harvest, we do it very early, we do it when it's where are you, Derek? Do you hear me? You are back. Okay. We do it at
Perfect.
We do it at we never do any green harvest, but we do it when the shoots are like this, you know. So we do it, but much earlier, and we don't. In 2018, when I was looking at the quantity of fruit, we had absolutely no reason to make any green harvest because we did it before in early May, and but that was more about again the fruit in the berry, the juice in the berry. So that was totally surprising for us.
Mm. And is it a vintage that maybe reminds you of any previous vintages that you've vinified, or do you think it was unique?
Probably at my father's estate, 2000 was this kind of vintage, but you know, you cannot really compare because it was not the same maturity date, the same period of maturity. So it's but to have this early picking date and to have this freshness, it was quite unique in 2018.
Okay. Because one of the obvious questions that we get asked on the not only your wines but obviously friends and producers is things like longevity or when the wine should be drunk. Obviously, it depends on which parcel, whether it's a village or Grand Cru or Premier Cru, but almost just as a generalization, with your experience with 18, where does it sort of fit in terms of how you think it's going to evolve? Is it sort of an early to medium term vintage from a drinking point of view, or do you think it's going to go a long time? Where do you, I know it's still early, but what is your feeling?
I think they need minimum few years more from now, even for the low appellation wines. Like you know, we don't do anything to bring them more approachable from the beginning. Mm. So they are what they are, you know. They need even for the low appellation, they need minimum 2-3 years from now. You can drink them now. I mean, there is no problem at all. There will be they will show already something, but they will be much nicer in 3-4 years for the lowest appellation.
Yeah.
And then for the Chassagne Premier Cru, on the Grand Cru, on the Meursault Premier Cru, they need minimum 5-6 years from now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Wayne's just given me a glass of one of your wines, but he hasn't told me what it is. So I'm not going to embarrass myself and guess on Zoom. So maybe he'll let me know what it is. But it smells amazing. That's all I know. And I'm about to have a sip. Pierre-Yves,
11 Chamgar.
What, 11?
2011 Chamgar. Chassagne-Montrachet.
It's amazing. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'll talk about the first one, Pierre-Yves. I'll send you a mail tomorrow. But this is seriously good.
Thank you. Thank you.
I promised that I'd try and deal with some of the questions when they sort of fit in and are relevant. I see Matthew's. It's quite a nice one about picking dates, which I assume have changed quite a lot over the last 10 or 15 years. He was just saying in terms of how those picking dates have perhaps moved. To what extent have the picking dates moved from, let's say, 15, 20 years ago to 2018? Is it quite a big difference in terms of when you used to pick to now because of the climate and things like that?
Yes, it's things change a lot. I remember at my father's estate, when we were picking around September 15, it was quite early. The first vintage was 2003, where when people picked the first. It was not our case at my father's estate, but some growers, they started to pick around August 20. And so 2003 was the first vintage. Then it depends on the vintage, but yeah, I think 2003 was the first vintage where growers became more sensitive in terms of date of picking. Even if it's different logic in terms of different approach in terms of date of picking, on ripeness, on balance, all the growers became ready earlier to start or to wait before to pick. But everybody is now organizing the cellar and everything to be ready much earlier compared to what it was in the past.
Yeah, and I suppose 18 was maybe the start of certainly the generalized talk of there being a bit more heat or a bit more sun in terms of the region, which then also came again in 19, and climate change or whatever, but that sort of extra bit of sun, is that something that you are worried about going into the next 10 years, or do you think the vines are strong enough to do what they've done in 18, produced amazing wines, or what is your feeling about that side of things?
We can see that our vineyards are more tired compared to what they were 10 years ago. I think those different strong summer in terms of heat and dryness did affect them quite strongly last 10 years. We have this big problem with 16149 Portegreff, Woodstock. That is really, really bad with those summer. So we have more and more vineyards that are really becoming old before they should be. So yeah, we are really worried about that, and but that is maybe one of the good things with 2021 frost. It's maybe we have only 1 or 2 or 3 shoot per vine, so that will be probably give them some reserve for the future. We hope so. Yeah,
I like it. It's a good optimistic view, which is in a very difficult year. So I like it. Pierre-Yves, I'm just to manage the time because we're trying to do 1 hour. So I'm looking at 7:30. So I'm sure you'll probably stay on the call if you're happy to, just for the next half an hour. And if there's anything that's where it's appropriate to ask a question, we'll move to Antoine. But I just wanted to say thanks. That's a really nice little snapshot of 18 and obviously what you've been up to. And as we always say, thanks very much for allowing us access to your amazing wines. And we'll have you in South Africa soon.
Thank you, Derek. Thank you very much. Thank you to all the team. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Pierre-Yves.
Antoine, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
How's it going? Nice to have you.
Yeah. Good to see you.
Yeah, you too. You've been listening to what's been happening further south of you with the white wines, but obviously with tonight's session, we wanted to obviously give another angle to what we're going to be getting soon. Is obviously on the red side, and again, much like what I did with Pierre-Yves. Now, I think you were obviously in South Africa recently, which was great, and I'm sure that quite a few people on the call went to the tastings, which was fantastic. But I'm sure some people weren't there at the time. So if you could maybe also just give a very, very short sort of summary of the amazing Domaine Henri Gouges, and then also when you entered the business, and then maybe we'll move on to the 18 vintage and understand what happened with the reds.
Okay. So next time I will come back, but to explain again. But just about the domain. So I did arrive in 2011, and I started to work with my uncle and cousin. Now my 2 uncles are retired, and I'm in charge with my cousin Gregory since 2017. So we work together in the vineyard vinification, and we share. And about the domain, it's called Domaine Henri Gouges because it has been created by my great grandfather. So that was in the 20s, and now we are the fourth generation to work together at the Domaine. We are situated in Nuit-Saint-Georges, and we produce wine only in Nuit-Saint-Georges on the appellation.
Yeah, so you and Gregory, you winemaking and obviously time in the vineyards almost equally, or does one of you do more of the vineyard stuff and the cellar stuff?
I'm more in charge in the vineyard, and is more on maybe probably the tractor mechanic side. And for the vinification, I am in the vineyard during the harvest, and after we vinify together. So okay. We share like that, and we do testing. We do. There is no rules.
Yeah,
it's a bit different because the generation before us, both of my uncles, it was more strict. One was in the vineyard, and the other one was in the cellar. But for me, it's impossible to do only vineyard or only wine. It's the most interesting is to share and to understand both sides.
Yeah, well, a family domain, and you're sharing all the duties, all the things that need to be done. And I suppose with you spending a bit more time in the vineyards, it's also been probably quite a challenging time. We touched on it with Pierre-Yves, but obviously the big news that we received in April were all these terrible frosts that were attacking, or that a lot of the French regions had experienced. I'm assuming that Nuit-Saint-Georges wasn't exempt from the frost, which I'm sure you also experienced.
Yeah. As Pierre-Yves said, we get some weird conditions this year, and unfortunately, Chardonnay has been really, really bad impacted. Here in Côte de Nuit, it's a bit better. Really depend of the plot and the way the vineyard is done. But here in Nuit-Saint-Georges, for our plot, it's not so bad. We think about 20-30%, but it's a bit early to say that, because we have to wait for the flowering. But we just start to the vineyard just start to grow since 1 week very fast. So we'll see the flowering probably in the next 2 weeks.
Okay. And Antoine, before we maybe go on to the 18, the reds, I think the vinification is an interesting, quick topic. I think the Domaine has a reputation, for those that have been lucky enough to drink a few of the older bottles from the estate. It's wines that have got a reputation for lots of structure, lots of sort of ability to age in the cellar. Historically, in their youth, they were quite sort of difficult maybe to attack early, because it was in that lovely old school style, traditional. And I think with maybe the newer generation, things have loosened up, where you can actually drink a bottle of the Gouges when, as I say, if it's 1 or 2 years old, you can engage with the wine, and that's obviously there's a few things that have changed. So maybe if you can just give an idea of what used to be done and what gets done now.
Okay. Yes, I think a lot of things change and evolve in the vineyard and in the winery. The wine from the Domaine, as you say, they had the reputation to age very well, and my uncle did great wine to age, but you couldn't open them before 10-15 years sometimes for the Premier Cru. It was probably more extraction in the vinification, and the ripeness of the grapes was not the same. And so this weather is hard and complicated to manage, but we get better maturity, phenolic maturity, and so we get softer tannins with more finesse. which is really important for the red, and especially in Nuit-Saint-Georges, because most of our vineyards are situated in the south of Nuit, where you get wine with a big structure, big balance, and the tannins can be quite strong. So we evolve. We get grapes more ripe, and we try to be very soft and very quiet, we take care of the fruit from the picking until the décuvage. So now we work everything by gravity. We have a winery that is made to work only by gravity. So there is the goal is to do the less trituration as possible and keep the fruit intact, nearly intact. So we desteam everything, but we desteam it very softly to get the whole berry in the cellar and not smash the grapes. And we go very soft on the extraction. We work in concrete tank with it's closed concrete tank, which is not very usual, and we have a pigeage that is pneumatic pigeage, so we don't do hand or pigeage with the foot. It's very soft, and it's work a bit like a Italian coffee press, so it's a maceration.
And Antoine, your uncle, from a stems point of view, because it's quite interesting. It seems like in Burgundy, it's quite a big thing that people talk about whole bunch and the use of stems, where it seems there's a bit more of a trend at certain red wine domains to use a bit more of that. Historically, was it always destemmed at the domain since the beginning?
Yes, since the beginning, I think Henri started to desteam. It's quite important. It's quite fashion to do whole bunch now. It's interesting to keep the freshness in warm vintage. We do a bit of try with that, but it's important for us to get the identity of the terroir, because we produce 8 different Nuit-Saint-Georges Premier Cru, and we really want the identity and the personality of those cru. And sometimes when you put whole bunch, you can, during the first years, you can lose a bit the identity of the terroir with whole bunch. So we put a touch in few cuvées we do, but and as I say, with the tannins of Nuit, if you add whole bunch, you can have tough tannins.
Yeah, and I think what's also interesting, and correct me if I'm wrong, but with the use of a bit more stems lately in certain domains, with in combination with vintages that are now being influenced a bit more by sun, you're going to potentially get a lower acidity on the wine with that addition. So it's quite a careful juggle in terms of following a trend, along with a bit of extra, call it solar vintages, which maybe started properly from the 2018 vintage, maybe.
Yeah, you can lose a bit of acidity, and but the whole bunch can bring freshness too. So it's a debate. It's a lot of speaking.
No, well, I'm just also looking at the time. So let's chat about the 2018 vintage, Antoine. I think one of the things, of course, we at the end of the African continent, so people are reading a lot and watching videos and finding out about and chatting to us about the vintage. I think one of the big things when you read about a vintage which experienced more sun, let's call it more sun hours than normal, people want to know about the ripeness in the wines, the balance, and then I think in particular in Burgundy, you want to know if the the conditions of the vintage have prevented the expression of the different terroirs, because I think that's largely the excitement of Burgundy, drinking wines from different plots, especially at your domain, all those amazing vineyards in one village. In 18, how did you feel about the terroir expression in relation to, say, that extra bit of sun that was experienced? How did you manage that, and what was the end result?
For me, 18 is a rich vintage. It was ripe, very good ripeness, phenolic maturity, but the balance is very nice. It's a rich vintage, but with good balance and already very accessible. We made the choice to do shorter élevage, so usually we can do 16 to 18. We started to do some bottling after 12-13 months to keep the freshness and the fruit of the vintage, because you get a great fruit in this vintage. So, but Pierre-Yves told about already spoke about the condition. Huh? It was quite unusual. We get very wet winter, and after the spring we get a lot of rain and a lot of sun. So the vineyard grow very fast and in very good condition. The flowering was very fast, so we get an homogeneity in the maturity. The only we get a bit of trouble and a bit of damage on few plots with the hail. So we had to sort very carefully. So we had 20-25 pickers that do the sorting to really get the berries and the berries intact, the grapes in good condition in the tank.
And Antoine, from a yield point of view, I think I read somewhere that one of your neighbors, I think they mentioned that they, I think, picked 50% less than what they would normally yield in 2018. Did you also, were your yields a bit better? Or, I mean, I know it's very, everyone's very specific in terms of where their vineyards are. How were your yields in 18? I know, yeah.
It was quite a generous vintage for us. It's the same yield than 17. So it's between 35 and 40 hectoliters per hectare. So it's quite high for the domain, because in the last 10 years the average yield is about 25 hectoliters. So it was good vintage, quite generous. And as Pierre say, the fact we had a bit more quantity kept the balance of the wine.
Okay, and just maybe a bit of insight into how that relates to 19 and 20, which obviously we'll only do next year and the year after. How does 18 sort of link in with 19 and 20?
For me, 19 is a bit more classical of Pinot Noir, because we harvested in the middle of September, and 20 is totally different. We get very low yield, about 15 hectoliters per hectare, so it's very low because of the dryness and the hail. So 18 is the last generous vintage.
Okay. Yeah, I'm seeing Matthew says that in 2019 it's 100 years of Henri Gouges.
Yeah, exact.
He's on the ball.
Yeah, we celebrate that. We decided to reuse the original label of the domain to put on our cuvée Les Saint-Georges.
Yeah, I think I sent you I think I sent you that message on Instagram when you took the picture. At the label is amazing because it's often, sometimes labels are changed in Burgundy and it's not for the better because the old ones are nicer. But that label is amazing. It's beautiful. I think it's a perfect homage to the. Have you got one there?
No, it's not one. I've
okay.
got one, but not far. But you know, with the green label, we have really an identity, and
sure.
it was a decision. We didn't know how people will take it, but most of the people like it. So we are very happy with it.
No, it's beautiful. Well, we'll obviously deal with that next year. And how, Antoine, how's it been sort of since, because you haven't been able to receive many guests and importers and do tastings. It must be a sort of quite a strange period in a way.
Yeah, it's strange. It's very quiet. We get few sommeliers in France. All the restaurants are closed, so the sommeliers were traveling around. But no, the cellar is very quiet actually.
Yeah, because how much of the trade that you did would be with restaurants? Is it sort of a lot or a little? Or?
We do about 30%. The domain have always do a lot of export because Henri Gouges, my great grandfather, was one of the first to do bottling at the domain in the 20s. At this time, most of the wine growers were selling grapes to the negociant, and he was one of the first to do the bottling and to ship. He started to ship to US just after prohibition, so he was visionary, and so we kept this international market.
Yeah. No, it's just interesting with the restaurants and obviously people not having bought a lot, and and every country is different, so it's always interesting to get some insight. Antoine, just the vintage, one of the important things, and I did ask Pierre-Yves, and it's something that, as I say, friends and clients always want to know. 18 from your point of view with the reds, longevity. Where does the family see the 18s sort of evolving to relative to maybe? I mean, we've actually been drinking a few 17s recently of your wine. I mean, not only your wine, some of the other producers. 17s are just, I love them. Every time we pull a cork on 17, very similar to 7, I think, where there's just beautiful fruit. It's quite light. It's approachable, but it'll still probably age nicely for 10, 15 years. Whereas 18 would probably be a bit different, maybe slightly more serious. But let me not finish the sentence. Maybe you tell me what you think, the differences.
For me, yeah, 18 is a bit more serious and a bit more rich than 17, and I think the potential of aging is even better than the 17. We got a good potential of aging, but it's a vintage that is already very accessible. For example, we drink with friend Nuit-Saint-Georges Village 2018 yesterday. After half an hour, the bottle is open. The wine is already showing very well. So it's accessible, but have the concentration and the potential of aging to be kept for the Nuit-Saint-Georges Village. It can be open after 3-5 years. For the Premier Cru, I will recommend a bit more to have a better expression of the wine. But if you want to keep in good condition in a cellar, it can age for 15-20 years. I don't know if you do that, Derek, but
no, we try, and I think if you remember that our last lunch that we had together, where you spoilt us with a very particular bottle of wine, which didn't have a label on, if you remember, and it was, Wayne, correct me, was it 1950?
It was indeed a 1950 Clos de Porret. It goes down as probably one of the top 5 or 10 wines I've had in my life, and I've drunk a lot of Burgundy. It was unbelievable.
Thank you very much, Wayne.
Incroyable.
Yeah, that was certainly one of ever had. And, it wasn't because, excluding the company food, which happened to be quite good. No, the wine was very special, and that's why I think it's interesting when people buy wine. Of course, you're never going to buy wine with the intention of maybe aging it 50 or 60 years. But I think when you have a wine like that and it's at that appellation, and then you go, that is what these wines can do. Of course, the climate's changed. There's been small changes in winemaking and things like that, probably advancements and improvements. But to have a window into what that wine can do and then drink 17s and 18s, I think, say 10, 15 years, it's probably a lot more than that with a lot of these wines. I think the wines will age, yeah.
And when you know the condition in the 40s, 50s, it was not the same climate, it was not the same work. Today it's a lot easier, I think, that what they were doing. But for the century, we opened, because we have our oldest bottle is 1919, and we opened that for Christmas with all the family. We were 30 for one bottle, so we only had a few drops. But it was amazing to have all this history in a glass. It was, and the wine was surprisingly quite fresh, still fresh. Wow. Evolved, but amazing.
That's amazing. Yeah. No, when you can drink history, it's a privilege. It's and around Nuit-Saint-Georges as the family, is there any intention to buy any more vineyards? I know in Burgundy that's become quite difficult because of the price of land and vineyards, but is it something that's part of the plan, or is it like not at all?
It's complicated because the domain is owned by all the family, and so we're 25 people to own, and it's really difficult. The vineyard is getting really expensive, so we try to find some winemaker partner, wine grower to find some good grapes, organic grapes. But it's hard to find here in Burgundy. So we do a little bit of négoce, but it's very small quantity.
Just a small part. Yeah, no, it's interesting because we obviously watch what's going on. Antoine, I'm looking at the time, and we try to keep things quite neat in terms of what we've communicated to everyone, whether they in the middle of dinner or just about to have dinner, hopefully with some proper Burgundy. And then a very South African thing is that in 2 minutes, Christine, who's very kindly done all the behind the scenes stuff, she has load shedding, which means all the lights and electricity goes off. So there's actually a firm end to the session, thanks to the local electricity supply. But I think we've managed to get through a lot of what we wanted to do with the two of you. Just a sort of a brief oversight in terms of what everyone can expect with the 18 vintage. We're obviously very excited. We're not drinking 18 now, but we're trying a few of the older vintages. And Pierre-Yves, I know that you meant to be one of these days. Antoine's been here, so he can tell you that it's not so bad in South Africa. Quite a nice place.
No, it's okay. It's great. You have to go, Pierre. Yeah.
So, no, just a big thanks to you guys for your time. I know that, as I say, to fit these things in, and there's lots of it happening with all your other markets when you do them. So we appreciate your time. And Wayne, myself, Charlotte, and the team, we're looking forward to being able to visit you in the cellar again. And just thanks again. And we look forward to receiving the wines in a few weeks.
Thank you so much for organizing that.
Pierre-Yves and Antoine, thanks very, very much from myself, Venetia, Derek, and Charlotte in the house. You guys are great as usual. We've missed seeing you, and We'll see you soon, we hope.
I hope.
Thanks very much for tonight. It's
I hope
very
I hope to see all of you soon.
Voilà.
Thanks, guys. And thanks, everyone, for joining. Have a good evening.
Good evening.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Merci. Au revoir.